Washington, D.C. is capital and home to many of the most recognizable landmarks in our country. Millions of tourists visit Washington, D.C. each year to see the White House, the Washington Monument, the Vietnam and Korean Veterans Memorials, and the World War II Memorial. But the most visited destination in all of Washington lies on a hill in Virginia, just southwest of the city, in Arlington National Cemetery. This resting place of some of the most revered names in American history is also home to those who have no name, the tomb of the unknown soldier. More visitors come here than any other place in Washington, and it is a place of quiet dignity, ceremony, and solemn respect.
I think the tomb is the central point of the cemetery. It's located almost geographically, if you will, in the center of the cemetery. People have to make a little bit of a pilgrimage, again, once you arrive here at the cemetery, unless you're disabled or you have another purpose of being here in the cemetery. So you're walking to this site, and I think that 10 or 15 minute walk to the site gives you time to reflect, and even if you don't reflect on the way up, I think you will on the way back, as to what this tomb represents.
Well, I read an article in our Sunday paper about the guards at the unknown soldier tomb. So I sort of, at that moment, said that's a goal. I would love to do that.
I was watching a program on TV that was covering Memorial Day services at Arlington National Cemetery, and it caught my attention because I saw the caisson and I saw the honor guard, and I sat down and I was watching it, and they suddenly went to the tomb of the unknown soldier. And I had never seen it before other than in a book in school. And I saw that and I watched the changing of the guard, and I was riveted in my seat by the whole thing.
As a teenager, when I came to visit Washington, D.C., and I had the opportunity to come to Arlington National Cemetery and watch the changing of the guard, my lasting impression was one of professional excellence and pride in seeing something done to such a degree that I had never seen really before in the execution of drill and ceremony.
Was with the senior trip when we went to Washington, D.C., saw the monuments, saw Congress, and we went to Arlington. And of all the things that I did and saw while we were in Washington, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier impressed me the most. I just felt that was a special, sacred place.
France and England had first honored their unknown war dead in 1920. Italy and other European nations soon followed. For the United States, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier was introduced by New York Congressman and decorated World War I veteran Hamilton Fish through a public resolution in December of 1920 and approved the following March. After a public viewing in the rotunda of the Capitol on November 11, 1921, a funeral procession led by President Warren G. Harding wound its way through the streets of Washington to Arlington, and the unknown soldier from World War I was laid to rest. Ten years later, in 1931, a marble sarcophagus with 3 figures representing peace, victory, and valor, and the inscription, "Here rests in honored glory an American soldier known but to God," was added to the crypt.
A veteran of World War I came to pay his respects here at the tomb. And the tomb had different configuration at that time as well. It was just only about 2 feet off the ground and it looked like a table. And he was very shocked. He came around the corner and saw some people sitting on it and enjoying a picnic. And in the days of much easier access to the president, he was outraged and went to the White House, was able to voice his concerns. And that's what established the first civilian guard here.
In May of 1958, 2 more soldiers were buried in marble-capped crypts at the head of the tomb itself, one from World War II and one from the Korean War. "26 years later, in 1984, a soldier from the Vietnam War was buried between them, but in 1998, through DNA testing, that unknown soldier was identified as Air Force First Lieutenant Michael Blassie, and his remains were moved to the Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery near St. Louis, Missouri. That crypt remains empty today, but an inscription was added, honoring and keeping faith with America's missing servicemen, 1958 to 1975.
Here we had honored a soldier from the Vietnam War. Very, very important to do. We still do that with the inscription on the grave, and it'll never be forgotten.
When the tomb was dedicated in 1921, a simple civilian watchman was posted at the tomb while the cemetery was open, and it would be 5 years before a military guard was installed in 1926. While the cemetery was open to visitors, a sentinel from the U.S. Army's Washington Provisional Brigade stood watch, and in 1937, the post was expanded to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and was filled by a variety of units, including then Colonel George Patton's 3rd U.S. Cavalry. On April 6, 1948, the Army's 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, also known as the Old Guard, assumed the permanent duty of guarding the tomb of the unknown soldier. And as the units guarding the tomb changed, so did their uniforms.
In 1941, there was no such thing as a dress uniform. It was a standard OD uniform that are in my pictures that show me with a olive drab jacket and slightly lighter breeches and boots and spurs.
We wore the ODs, the Class A olive drab uniform with blouse, garrison cap, khaki shirt. We wore a hat band. Well, I forget what you call them, but anyway, the hat band was white, and we wore the white leggings. Everybody calls them spats. They're not spats. They were white leggings. And I didn't like them for a couple of reasons. I thought that the straight leg was a much nicer uniform.
As part of the 3rd U.S. Infantry, tomb guards are led by their platoon leader or commander of the guard, the sergeant of the guard, and relief commanders.
The main purpose of the sergeant of the guard is to provide oversight in the training of new sentinels, to conduct all the testing of the new sentinels to help them progress, and for the testing of their tomb guard identification badge, to provide all necessities that all the soldiers, both in training and permanently assigned, need, and to continually keep up the supply and maintenance.
The commander of the guard and the sergeant of the guard are the only positions that are competed for and selected by the Army's chain of command.
My commanding officer had to send my name up to regimental headquarters where it had to be approved by the regimental commander. When it was approved, then I was appointed Sergeant of the Guard. And that's when I took over the duties there.
With the exception of the commander of the Guard, all tomb guards are enlisted soldiers who have volunteered for both the Old Guard and then for duty at the tomb. The Guard is made up of 3 reliefs of 7 soldiers each. All members of the 3rd U.S. Infantry, including the tomb guards, must meet the regimental height standard, which is 5 feet 10 inches for men and 5 feet 8 inches for women.
Each of the 3 reliefs is broke down to size so that each relief doesn't have a huge size discrepancy between each individual.
Sergeant Heather Johnson was the first female tomb guard, serving from June of 1995 through November of 1996. Once the soldiers assigned to the tomb of the unknown soldier serve at least 9 months and have met all specified testing criteria, they are eligible to permanently wear the Tomb Guard Identification Badge, one of the rarest military decorations in the United States.
Everywhere they go, if they win that badge, everybody knows what that badge is.
To earn the badge, each soldier is subjected to intense scrutiny of execution of duties and uniform specifications from both the relief commander and the sergeant of the guard.
A group of volunteers that want to come down and try out for the tomb over a 14-day period learn the uniform standard at the tomb, which is much different than the rest of the regiment. They initially have to memorize 7 pages of knowledge dealing with Arlington National Cemetery history, Tomb Guard history, and Old Guard history. And then they learn the plaza sequence guard change minus the finer points of that guard change. And after that 14-day period, they test out on those 3 areas, the uniform, the knowledge, and the guard change sequence. And if they pass, they're assigned to a relief. Over 3 different test periods, each test period lasting 30 to 45 days. They're tested again on those 3 areas. Each time, though, that they're tested, they can only make a fewer number of mistakes. By the time they get to the 3rd test period, now they've memorized 17 pages of knowledge. Once they pass that 3rd test, then they're given 9 days to prepare for their Tomb Guard Identification Badge test.
For one of the first times ever, cameras were allowed into the Tomb Guard quarters for the testing process.
What do you think about this? Nice thought. What do you think about that?
I think that's good to go.
You think?
Yep.
I was tempted to turn the steamer
It's not steering.
because I only have 2 questions. We'll see if you answer them.
Both the physical appearance of the uniform and precise details, such as button and decoration location, are measured while the sentinel remains at attention.
Finally, they have to take a 100-question written test dealing on the knowledge that they've learned. And some of the questions, the answers are well over 100 words long. And if they miss 1 word, leaving it out or adding it, then the whole question's wrong. And they can only get 10 questions wrong or they'll fail that portion. And then if they pass that, then they become a full-fledged sentinel and are awarded the Tomb Guard badge.
As was told to me when I first came onto the Guard, it's tough to become a member of the Honor Guard. It's tougher to stay.
Once a badge holder has left the tomb, and even after all military service has been completed, the Tomb Guard Identification Badge is the only military badge that can be revoked for conduct that brings dishonor or disrespect to the tomb. The tomb remains guarded, day or night, no matter the weather.
In the wintertime, we slept in the boiler room on canvas cots. So you sweltered when you were down off duty if you were trying to sleep. And then you went out in the cold and dampness of Washington, D.C. weather.
Damn cold in the wintertime. I remember that. Luckily, I wasn't out there in the damn heat. I was fortunate that I escaped that.
There was a huge snowstorm in Washington, D.C., and the snow was knee-deep, as I remember, and the civilian guards had to work to keep the mat clear and the plaza clear so we could change the guard, because that you're doing it 24 hours a day regardless of the weather.
In the middle of the night when it was 10 degrees out, you know, you would get out and you put on the warmest clothes and change guard and walk your turn and get back inside and crawl in the bed that the next guard had left. I mean, you were happy for his warmth.
Today, today's guards wear trooper caps in the wintertime. We didn't have trooper caps. We had just our regular hats, so our ears got cold. They got really cold.
We were 2 hours on and 4 off at nighttime. There were no electric lights there, but it was cold, very cold. It's a cold place, but it's still a beautiful place even in the wintertime.
We still had to wear our white dress gloves, and I can remember we would get the glove liners, the wool glove liners, and put them on, and then put the white gloves over that, which made it very difficult to hold the rifle because they were so bulky. And we used to have a habit of wetting those white cotton gloves before we would go out so they wouldn't slip on the stock of the rifle.
The seasons can be very hard on a guy. The winter can be brutal. I had incidents where I had icicles from my ears, or ice packed in my head, frostbite. Well, it didn't quite make it to frostbite, but hands soaking wet and just freezing. And every time you hit that rifle, it was painful. And then you have the heat. The heat would get to you in a way that it would just literally weaken you physically and emotionally.
They are physically exhausted when they come down into their tomb chambers to get ready and to prepare for the next mission. They are completely, their uniform underneath the wool is completely soaked.
The perspiration would drop on your brass, and if you didn't get it off, it would pit brass. So we would polish our brass in between each turnout at the guard, polish the shoes so they'd be back up, because in the summertime, standing out there, the heat would just melt your polish.
We could see our tracks left on that mat. I was soaking wet. I know that there wasn't a dry stitch of clothing on me. My uniform was absolutely drenched. And a general, 1 star, but a general, walked up to me while I was standing, of course, in at attention, ready to move on. He saluted me and said, "God bless you, son."
Even when Arlington National Cemetery is closed to the public, tomb guards remain at their post and continue the ceremony that draws the respect and admiration of countless visitors from the United States and around the world, the changing of the guard.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? I'm Staff Sergeant Mason of the 3rd Infantry Regiment, United States Army, commander of the relief, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. The ceremony that you're about to witness is the changing of the guard. In keeping with the dignity of this ceremony, it is requested that everyone remain silent and standing. Thank you.
It takes place every half hour in the spring and summer, and every hour in the autumn and winter, and is a solemn display of military precision.
Everything in the guard change sequence is on a cadence. It's a count. And what you're trying to do is get all 3 individuals in the guard change sequence
place at the tomb.
Reason. On.
American presidents traditionally lay a wreath at the tomb on both Memorial Day and Veterans Day, and over 2,700 wreaths are placed at the tomb each year, in simple ceremonies with school, civic, or church groups, Army full honor ceremonies with foreign military leaders, and Armed Forces full honor ceremonies with all the branches of the United States military for government leaders.
Right shoulder.
From March to June, we lay 23 public wreaths a day, and we do 23 guard changes a day. And this summer, from March to June, I only had 3 to 4 people that were qualified to go outside. So what you had is one NCO relief commander who was doing 23 guard changes and hosting 23 wreaths. And then I had 2 sentinels who would do 12 to 13 walks a day, and when they weren't walking, they were being a wreath bearer for a wreath. And so what they were getting was maybe 2 minutes in between each guard change and each wreath.
One of the highest honors the United States military can give is the 21-gun salute, and this honor is symbolically given at the tomb of the unknown soldier every minute of every day. Each sentinel that guards the tomb or walks the mat crosses the plaza in exactly 21 precise, deliberate steps. Upon turning, the guard faces the tomb for 21 seconds in silent salute. Then the sentinel turns again and pauses for another 21 seconds before recrossing the plaza again in another 21 steps.
The first time I walked the mat, in a sense, in a real technical sense, was the night that I was tried out, if you will. I hit the south end of the mat. I was at Port Arms, and I remember when my heel hit the mat, a chill went right through me.
It became almost second nature. The count, the move, the rifle slaps, the constant cadence in your mind that became a beat, as opposed to in the beginning, and we were told count 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. After a while it was 1001, 1002, and then it became a pulse, and you knew it.
My first trip down the mat, when I was facing Washington, D.C., I'll never forget this. I could hear this noise, and I wasn't quite sure what it was. Then it dawned on me. The bayonet at the end of my rifle was shaking. I was trembling here from the excitement, fear, nerves, whatever it was. And I did my 21-second count and faced the other end of the mat and did my manual and made my first trip down the mat, and the cameras and the people and everything else, and I really never had a nervous moment after that.
Where the facing movements were done on either end of the mat and in front of the tomb, there was an extra piece of mat placed on top of that to prevent the wearing of the mat. I remember one time I'm going along doing what I'm supposed to do, and my foot got caught on the centerpiece, the extra centerpiece. Right shoulder arms, I remember, it's what I remember, right? And I almost fell. And I had to run to catch up, and the rifle was going up ahead of me like that, and I'm going, and I was lucky I didn't fall.
We did pretty much the same as they do today, except that we did not do the rifle inspection like you see them do on the plaza today. That would have been a little tricky because we carried loaded ammunition.
While on their watch, today's tomb guards carry an M14 rifle with a chrome bayonet, as do all members of the 3rd Infantry. The rifle is always carried on the shoulder of the tomb guard away from the tomb itself, as a symbolic gesture against outside intrusion on their post.
It's pretty much exactly what I carried. That had obviously has the chrome fixtures on it. The only thing different is I don't have the original sling that we used, that I used out there. Obviously, when we walk with a bayonet on the end of it. The manual that they use is a little different. The basics of changing the shoulder and everything are all there. Some of the moves that they make are different.
Underneath the cemetery's memorial amphitheater are the tomb guard quarters, where each soldier begins the day. Long before the sun comes up, and far from the public's eye, the starched white cotton blouse and heavy wool dress blue uniform is steam pressed, often multiple times and with straight pins, to achieve the stiff creases and sharp lines that are so identifiable with the guards.
The uniform takes time, takes a soldier 6 to 8 hours a day just to prep a uniform for one day.
We had fellows that tailored their underwear so there wouldn't be a bulge in their uniform or a wrinkle in their uniform when they went out there.
Sentinels are as meticulous with their uniforms as they are with every other duty and responsibility they hold.
Goodness, we had fellows that chromed their bed springs. It was unbelievable. Poured the paint on their footlocker so that it would look like it was just a sheet of glass instead of brushing it. I loved all of that.
The tomb guard quarters are also where sentinels have their own personal locker, as well as where they practice their movements and the changing of the guard, using large mirrors to maintain their positions and to check posture and handling of weapons.
What's special is that it isn't just that they've got the tools at their disposal in terms of shoes and the uniform. It's that the mental toughness and their own desire is what is making them push themselves to perfection.
Although they are reinforced in the heel and toe and equipped with steel heel taps, their footwear is standard issue Army shoes that are shined to a mirror-like finish before and after every guard change.
Those shoes that they wear are much less forgiving than any boot that we have, but they're built up for a reason, and they're built up for a reason to actually, protect the soldier, because that hard, even though they're marching on a mat, the reason they're marching on a mat is really to protect the marble. It's not cushioning, the soldier's march.
They were basically Black Army issue shoes that we would have double-soled or triple-soled, depending. And we would have what we called a cheater, which was a blank of steel countersunk into the heel that would allow us to emphasize the heel clicks during the guard change. And then they were spit shine. You spent a lot of time with a wet sponge and polish just filling in the grain of the leather so that you finally get to the point where what you're polishing is polish and not so much leather. Today I notice that they are still using the double-soled shoes or triple-soled, but they have their what we call cheaters built out from their heel. Instead of being countersunk, they have them out. And they tell me when I visit that they had that done because it keeps them from banging their heels together.
Despite their stoic demeanor, tomb guards are highly sensitized to their surroundings, aware of the slightest movements, noise, and the comments of the gathered visitors.
While on guard, we are guarding the tomb. We must be fully aware of all of our surroundings. I watch all the visitors, make sure they're all being respectful and not threatening to come onto our post. It's very important that we follow those guidelines.
In the daytime, you are very focused on the precision of your movements, and at the same time you're also alert to any potential for an intrusion, whether intended or otherwise, from outside the chains, being the public, and that no one is to come in, and so you're alert to that. But I would say the focus is really on the precision of your movements and making sure that everything is as perfect as you can possibly be.
The actual plaza was the same as it is now. However, there was nothing to keep the crowds back. They could walk right up and walk on the mat. They could walk right up to the tomb as long as they didn't touch it. Some of them, of course, tried to. But there was a rail around it about 2 feet away from it.
There was no chains around the tomb. The crowd was free to go right up to you and walk between yourself and the tomb and actually get right in your face. So back then it must have been very, very demanding to maintain the demeanor that they did.
I remember many people being there, but not a noisy, rowdy place. A quiet crowd, a low hum.
Many times I would see people stop and I knew they were praying. I mean, you could tell they were praying. And usually it was older folks who probably had lost a loved one in, I would guess, World War II at that point in time, maybe some from Korea.
We were very observant of what was going on around us, and in faces of every description. You got to see America the way you read about it in books, of this, many shapes, many colors, Amish, people that come from, you can spot they came from different parts of the country, every race, every creed, every color, it was all there and you saw it.
I remember in those days, the plaza wasn't chained off from the public like it is now. And the people could come right up to the mat, stand on the mat, in fact.
I saw a woman, obviously a mother of 3 children, who came up on a snowy day and knelt and prayed before the tomb while I walked. And again, I had no way of knowing for certain, but it was my idea that she had lost either a son or a husband or a brother, and she was there to say hello and goodbye with her children.
I do remember some students from the University of Maryland being out there one day, and it was a overcast day, so on overcast days we weren't allowed to wear sunglasses. And they stationed themselves at each end of the mat and one in the middle to see if I was going to blink. Foolish as it was, I was decided I wasn't going to blink that day. I mean, everybody blinks, but I wasn't going to blink. So I didn't, and I remember them talking to each other. No, he didn't blink down here. No, he hadn't done it here. No, he hadn't done it here. So I outlasted them, and they finally left, and I went into the sentry box you were allowed in the sentry box to adjust your uniform. And I just went in and did as many blinks as I could to get the tears flowing again, and then back out.
I remember buses came in those days from downtown, tour buses, and they always timed it so that they would get there just a little bit before the changing of the guard and then leave afterwards. Well, the plaza would would fill up, and there would be wall-to-wall people right up to the mat, and you would be, then you knew it was near time that you were going to be relieved, and the people would be on either side of the mat, and sometimes standing on the mat, and you'd have to tell them to get off the mat.
Well, I think the best comments are the non-spoken ones. When you see the youngsters walk away mimicking the tomb guards, marching the way they march, clicking their heels. Of course, they've got sneakers or tennis shoes on, and they're not making any noise. And when you see that sometimes they're very young, and then sometimes the teenagers who are, hip and cool, and maybe this is not the thing that they'd want to be doing away from the cemetery, but that few moments after they've walked away, they have been impressed, and they are mimicking the tomb guards and how they marched, how they changed the guard.
There were times when cameras were inches from my face. You can't do that now, but in those days, we were practically among the crowd. The spectators, visitors could walk right up to the chains and be within a foot of you and follow you back and forth with movie cameras, and I had that happen any number of times.
The standard that they are upholding is something that has been provided over countless years of work towards a mission, and that is that tomb sentinel is really the family of the unknowns.
After a guard change, and the people were all leaving, and two nuns, and back in 1958 you could tell they were nuns because they were still in habits, stopped, and the one said, "God bless you, son, for what you're doing." And it gave me a chill, and something I remember obviously till this day.
The tomb itself is showing the effects of years in the elements, but plans are already underway for its preservation and eventual replacement.
There's a crack that is run all the way around the tomb once and is going around the tomb a second time. And what we're very concerned about is that the tomb itself will start to have pieces break off of it. I think the only logical thing to do is to find a very good piece of marble, be sure it's quarried the correct way, extract it from the quarry, and replicate it as close as physically possible to the existing tomb and replace it in time. And that's what our goal is right now.
The Society of the Honor Guard, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, is a nonprofit organization enabling tomb guards, both past and present, to continue to serve, honor, and fulfill their mission through a scholarship program, veterans assistance, as well as a means to maintain the lifelong friendships and camaraderie established at the tomb.
It keeps me involved because I want to honor the men that died for our country. And that's what the society is all about. The society is honoring those that have kept the faith, that have died for our freedoms.
And there are other exclusive fraternities, if you want to call it that, associations, we call it society, that have that identification with a job, an environment that they lived in. So it was not only were they rendering honors to the unknowns, but they were being honored themselves just by being selected to be there. And I think that kind of thing creates a bond among people who do that.
For me, I think it's with the other guys as well, working with tomb guards, there's nothing like it. Nobody owns work like tomb guards. I visited a couple of the hospitals with the returning war wounded, and they have some needs, and we're responding to that. We call it the Adopt a Soldier program, and our society members are responding beautifully, donating money to help them out with some things that they're doing.
The unknown, the guy under the marble. I think our bond is knowing what they know, what others know that have done the job, having had the experience and knowing that they've had the same experience, the long nights, the heat of the summer, the polishing of the shoes, the responsibility that you carry, the honor of being there. I know that every man or woman that's ever walked the tomb has had that same experience, and so I share that. I can walk up and begin a conversation with that person, and there is no transition. We're immediately on the same page.
The question is, why do we guard the tomb? Some 43 years ago, when I was a platoon leader here, I was out here one day inspecting a guard change about this time. That's kind of the day. And as usual, standing on the plaza out there in uniform, a lot of people come up and ask you questions. This little lady came up and asked me a series of questions, the usual questions you get, like, do the guards like their duty here? How are they selected? How long do they walk? Etc. And I answered all those. Then we had a guard change, and after she came back to me, and she looked me right in the eye, and she says, "Why do you guard the tomb?" And I said, "I'll give you a two-part answer. First, we protect this American memorial. And secondly, we provide continuous honors, the highest honors, to the unknown soldier." And she said, "What do you mean by continuous?" And I said, "Well, let me tell you that in the first place, the highest honors we render to this country or any other places is 21-gun salute. We do it for heads of state, kings, the President of the United States. They get a 21-gun salute. And this soldier, in his own little soldierly way, walking the mat out here, is rendering continuously, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Rain, shine, snow, it doesn't matter. He's out there continuously rendering those honors. I said, "Let me show you." And so we looked out, and I pointed to the guard on the mat. I said, "He starts at the south end of the mat. He walks 21 steps to the opposite end, halts, faces the tomb, or faces east, always keeping his eye on the tomb. And he counts for 21 seconds. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004. Goes through that like that. At the end of that, he faces back to the south, changes his weapon to the opposite shoulder, always keeping his own body between the tomb and the weapon, any harm to include the weapon he's carrying. And then he counts 21 seconds again and goes through that. At the end of it, he marches off 21 steps to the opposite end, to the south end, halts, faces east, again, keeping the eye on the tomb, counts for 21 seconds, goes through the whole routine, all day long, all night long. Does the same thing, rendering in his small way the soldierly 21 count, the highest honors to the unknown. At that, she began to cry. And she says, "You may wonder why I'm asking these questions. But you see," she said, "this is the only place I have to pay my respects to my son who did not return from the war." With that, she walked away and she left a lieutenant marked for life.
The tomb of the unknown soldier at Arlington National Cemetery will always remain as America's most hallowed shrine, guarded by men and women who adhere to the highest of standards, whether they serve on active duty or have long finished their posts.
It's not an understatement to say that becoming a tomb guard was a defining moment in my life.
At the time, it didn't mean as much as it does now. You know, it's like anything when you're young. You don't fully appreciate what's happening. Then as the years went by, I realized what a great honor it was.
All tomb guards at some point after they've left greatly appreciate their time served here. Not all of them appreciate it while they're doing it to the level that they do at a later time. But at some point, all tomb guards while they're here will suddenly realize what it's all about. And at that point, an individual's personality changes. It's like lightning striking. Sometimes it can be just the solemnness of pulling night hours. Sometimes it can be an event that they see in the crowd while they're in the middle of a guard change or walking the mat. Sometimes it can be just a feeling of honor of what they're doing, knowing that they're one of a very small number of people to have ever done this or ever had the opportunity to do it.
I don't think there's been a day I haven't thought back about it.
When I think about the tomb soldiers, I think about the leadership example that they set. I think about the duty that they set. I think about their loyalty, the loyalty to the mission and the loyalty to the nation. I think about, quite honestly, the respect that they are able to demonstrate, both in how they honor the tomb and how they honor our profession in terms of how they do this mission.
One of the things you deal with out here is not just good soldiers, but good citizens. They got to be good at each. And if they're not, we don't keep them.
One of the reasons that I'm still at Arlington Cemetery this many years later is my connection with the tomb guards. Those are some of the most fantastic young men and women I've ever met in my life. And just to be a small part of that, and just to be considered perhaps part of the, I can't say fraternity because we have women, but part of that group, to me is something that, you know, when I retire, it'll be the highlight of my career.
I just feel like one of the luckiest guys in the world to have had that experience while in the military.
The recognition of the sacred trust placed in them by the American people to honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice for their country fuels their desire to fulfill their calling.
The level of what happens down there at the tomb when there's one sentinel that is marching out there, and the purpose of that sentinel is not so other people can see him. The purpose of that sentinel is to represent our nation, to represent our military as a guardian of the tomb. In the midst of a place of honor where all of our fallen heroes have been laid to rest, we hold the unknowns even at a higher status, because that is the one place where the public can come and observe the kind of dignity and honor that every single service member that has died or has served their nation should and rightly deserves to have.
The most important thing to remember about the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is it is America's most sacred shrine. We guard this not because it's our job, but because it is our duty. We take this very seriously, and we will guard no matter what it takes to ensure that the unknowns are protected and their honor is upheld. That is our mission.
It is not a job. It is a, it is a calling, and we do not look at this as anything other than really the greatest honor that we could possibly bestow for all those that are in fact serving, that cannot be seen by our public and by the citizens that have, that deserve to have the best army in the world.
When you get down to the tomb guard quarters and you see these young men, when they take off their hat and they take off their uniform, they're just like my kids, they're just like your kids. But when they put on that uniform and they go out there, they are strong, they are tall, they're just everything you want in a way of a disciplined soldier working for our country, guarding our nation.
The standard is perfection. It's not something special, it's not something different, it's not something that the rest of the Army doesn't understand. It is exactly what the Army does, but to an element of perfection that you see no place else.
Just as I, as a young teenager, saw what service sacrifice potentially means in my first visit, the millions of citizens whose Army this is our Army. They see it in a tangible way. So I think that Guard is carrying really the guard of honor of our nation. And it's in a way that everyone can see in a noticeable routine because they may not see the ceremonies that occur and they may not see any of the other things that we do, but they can count on one thing, that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year, that the Guard of Honor is there and representing our nation.
Tomb Guards will never waver from their commitment to their fallen comrades, America's unknown soldiers, and their vigilance to their mission, a mission embodied forever in the Sentinel's Creed. My dedication to this sacred duty is total and wholehearted. In the responsibility bestowed on me, never will I falter. And with dignity and perseverance, my standard will remain perfection. Through the years of diligence and praise, and the discomfort of the elements, I will walk my tour in humble reverence to the best of my ability. It is he who commands the respect I protect, his bravery that made us so proud. Surrounded by well-meaning crowds by day, alone in the thoughtful peace of night, this soldier will in honored glory rest under my eternal vigilance.